Sometimes an NBA career doesn't slowly fade away. Sometimes it takes just one bad season, one injury, one awkward moment, and everything falls apart. In today's video, we're looking at 5 NBA players whose careers completely changed direction after one major turning point. And trust me, some of these stories are way sadder than you probably remember.
Paul, who is from Winston-Salem, posted on social media overnight saying he just found out he is being sent home.
You know what's weird about aging NBA players? Sometimes they get older, slower, and clearly not the same player anymore, but somehow they still manage to stay productive. That's why what happened to Chris Paul felt so shocking. Because even at 39 years old, it looked like CP3 still had something left. The previous season in San Antonio, he actually looked pretty solid. The guy played all 82 games, started all 82 games too. At nearly 40 years old, that's honestly ridiculous. Sure, he wasn't vintage Chris Paul anymore, but he could still run an offense, knock down jumpers, and do what he's always done best, take care of the basketball. His assist-to-turnover ratio was still one of the best in the entire league. So naturally, when he returned to the Clippers, the team where he built so much of his legacy, people thought this could be the perfect ending. Maybe one final playoff run, maybe one last meaningful season, maybe even retirement with the franchise that helped define his career. That's not what happened. Because almost immediately, things started going downhill. And it wasn't just his game. The locker room situation? That got ugly fast. You could already tell something felt off. There were stories about teammates not really connecting with him. Even little moments stood out, like when Chris Paul hosted a Halloween party and invited teammates, but barely anyone showed up. Not exactly the best sign. And then came the moment that pretty much changed everything. One phone call. That was it. According to reports, Chris Paul called coach Ty Lue after being benched during the second half of a Clippers loss. Paul wanted answers. But instead of getting reassurance, the conversation apparently went in the complete opposite direction. Lue reportedly told him that his tone in the locker room had become too critical, that it was creating tension. And the worst part? Apparently, some players agreed. That's tough. Because for basically his entire career, Chris Paul's leadership style has always been intense. Some teammates loved it, some tolerated it, some absolutely hated it. He's always been the guy who demands perfection. But when you're still playing at a high level, people usually put up with it. The problem is, what happens when you're not playing well anymore? That's when everything changes. Paul reportedly tried to repair things. There were reports that he apologized publicly in the locker room, trying to smooth things over, but by that point, it sounds like the damage had already been done. After that phone call, things basically froze between him and Ty Lue. No real conversations, no fixing the relationship. And eventually, Chris Paul got sent home during a road trip. Just like that, shortly after he was gone. And honestly, for a player of his caliber, that's a brutal way for things to end. Because when you think about legends leaving the game, you picture retirement tours, standing ovations, farewell moments, not getting quietly pushed aside by the same franchise you once helped transform. Now, to be fair, this wasn't only about locker room drama. Age caught up to him too. There wasn't some huge injury, no dramatic explanation. It just looked like his body finally said, yeah, we're done here. And unfortunately, when your production drops while teammates are already tired of your leadership style, that's usually game over. Lonzo Ball's story is just sad. Because for a while there, it genuinely looked like he figured things out. Remember his Chicago Bulls run? That version of Lonzo was exactly the kind of player every team wanted. Elite defense, high basketball IQ, great passing, reliable shooting. He looked like one of the best 3-and-D point guards in the league. And for the first time in his career, everything seemed to finally click. Then the injuries happened, and nothing was ever the same again. When Cleveland picked him up in the summer of 2025, people were cautiously optimistic. Maybe this would finally be the comeback season. Maybe after years of rehab and surgeries, Lonzo could finally return to being himself. But pretty quickly, reality started hitting. His knees just weren't cooperating anymore. And honestly, the signs were already there. What originally seemed like a normal meniscus injury turned into one complication after another. 3 separate surgeries, years of rehab, constant setbacks. At one point, doctors reportedly concluded he needed a meniscus transplant, a donor. Think about how serious that sounds. That alone tells you just how bad things had gotten. By the time he got to Cleveland, it felt less like a comeback story and more like one final test. Could he still move? Could he still defend? Could he still be an NBA-level guard? Unfortunately, the answer started becoming obvious. His burst wasn't there anymore. The lift looked gone, the speed, not even close. And after just 35 games, it felt like the league quietly made up its mind. This version of Lonzo wasn't coming back. Then came the moment that really felt like the final blow. The Cavs traded him, which honestly, fine. Teams move on all the time. But what happened next said everything. Utah, a team literally rebuilding and trying to lose games, didn't even want to keep him. They waived him almost immediately. And when a tanking team doesn't even want to give you minutes, that's rough. Because normally, rebuilding teams take chances. They experiment. They let struggling players figure things out. But in Lonzo's case, it almost felt like the league collectively realized this might be it. And that's what makes his story so heartbreaking. This wasn't bad work ethic. This wasn't locker room drama. His body just betrayed him. And sometimes, there's nothing you can do about that. Mike Conley's decline felt different. Because unlike Chris Paul or Lonzo, this wasn't some huge locker room fallout or devastating injury story. It was more like one playoff run suddenly exposed everything age had quietly been taking away. For most of the season, Conley still looked useful. Sure, he was older. Sure, he'd slowed down. But he could still organize an offense, knock down open threes, and give Minnesota steady minutes. Honestly, for a 37-year-old guard barely over 6 feet tall, the fact he was still starting felt impressive. Then the playoffs happened, and things changed fast. Against younger, more athletic teams, the cracks started showing. Defenders pressured him constantly. His handle looked shakier. His ability to create separation? Pretty much gone. And once teams started running him off the three-point line, there really wasn't much left. Especially in the conference finals. Against OKC, things got ugly. Conley struggled badly to score, couldn't get to the rim, and looked overwhelmed by the pace and pressure. For the first time, it really felt like age had officially won. Then somehow things got even worse the next season. He got benched, then traded again. Eventually, Minnesota brought him back, not because he was still a major contributor on the floor, but because of something else: leadership. Everybody respects Mike Conley. He's one of those veteran voices young players trust. A calming presence, a locker room guy. But as an actual rotation player, the playoffs made it pretty clear those days were fading fast. You remember when Kevin Huerter was actually one of the better shooters in basketball? Back in Atlanta and Sacramento, this dude was automatic. Catch and shoot threes, movement shooting, spacing the floor. He fit perfectly, but over time, teams started noticing something. If Kevin Huerter isn't shooting well, what exactly is he giving you? And unfortunately, that became a real problem. By 2026, Detroit traded for him, hoping he could solve one of their biggest weaknesses: three-point shooting. Makes sense, right? Young contender, tough defensive identity. Just needed more spacing. The problem? Huerter didn't really fit anything Detroit wanted to be. This Pistons team built its identity on defense, hustle, and physical basketball. And honestly, that's never really been Huerter's game. Then the injuries started adding up. Back issues, hip problems, and suddenly even the one thing he was elite at, shooting, wasn't reliable anymore. His percentages dropped. His confidence looked shaky. And Detroit slowly stopped trusting him, because if he's not defending, not bringing energy, and not making shots, what role is left? That's the scary reality for specialists in the NBA. Sometimes your career hangs on one skill, and when that skill disappears, everything can disappear with it. Which brings us to someone who somehow kept getting chances for years. D'Angelo Russell has honestly been one of the hardest NBA players to figure out for years. Because one night, he looks incredible. Deep threes, smooth handles, tough shot making, flashy passes. The kind of offense that reminds everyone why he was drafted so high in the first place. And then the next game, you barely notice he's on the floor. That's basically been the D-Lo experience his entire career. Entertaining? Definitely. Talented? No doubt. Consistent and reliable? That's where things always started to fall apart. For years, teams kept believing there was another level he could reach. Even during his Lakers run, the numbers didn't look bad at all. He could still score, still shoot efficiently, and every once in a while he'd have a game where you thought, okay, maybe this version of D'Lo is finally here to stay. But then the playoffs would start, and suddenly the same problems kept showing up over and over again. Defensive mistakes, bad timing, losing focus in key moments, and overall it just felt like when the pressure got higher, D'Lo struggled to adjust. That became the biggest issue because regular season basketball and playoff basketball are completely different. In the regular season, talent can carry you pretty far. But in the playoffs, teams hunt weaknesses non-stop, and once opponents started targeting him, his flaws became impossible to ignore. Then the injuries started piling up too. The lingering foot injury, the lower back problems, and slowly the little things that made him effective started fading away. He wasn't moving the same anymore. The burst looked weaker, his balance on jump shots didn't look right. And once the scoring dipped, everything else got exposed. Because if D'Angelo Russell isn't giving you high-level offense, what else is he really bringing consistently? Eventually, the Lakers realized it and moved on. Then Dallas gave him an opportunity, but that situation didn't last long either. And eventually he landed in Washington. Now honestly, this might have been the biggest sign of all. Usually rebuilding teams love taking chances on talented veterans, especially guards who can still occasionally put up numbers. But even the Wizards, a team clearly focused more on rebuilding than winning right now, didn't seem all that interested in giving him a major role. And when struggling teams don't really see much value in you anymore, that's when reality starts hitting hard. It's honestly crazy how fast things change in the NBA. A year ago, some of these players still looked productive, still looked like they had something left in the tank, and now some careers are basically over, others are barely hanging on. One injury, one bad playoff run, one rough season. Sometimes that's literally all it takes for everything to change in this league. So guys, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.